They said she had 6 weeks to live. The world's most expensive doctors. The most advanced technology money could buy. All of them. Helpless. Thomas Sterling had built an empire worth billions. He could buy anything. Anyone. But he couldn't buy his daughter's next breath. Until the day a woman with calloused hands walked into his marble palace, carrying a secret that would change everything. A secret so forbidden, she could lose everything just for speaking it aloud. This is the story of what happened when desperation met humility, when science bowed to ancient wisdom, and when a powerful man learned that the greatest treasure of his home was the one person he'd refused to see. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. The phone call that shattered Thomas Sterling's world came at 3:47 a.m. Mr. Sterling, I'm afraid the treatment isn't working. Emma's inflammatory markers are the highest we've seen. Thomas stood at the window of his penthouse, watching the city lights blur below. 42 years old, self-made billionaire, technology genius, venture capitalist, the man who'd revolutionized 3 industries before turning 30. Completely powerless to save his 8-year-old daughter. In the next room, Emma slept fitfully, her small body fighting a war no doctor could explain. 6 specialists. For countries. 12 experimental treatments. Nothing worked. The mysterious autoimmune condition was stealing her strength day by day, and Thomas was watching his daughter slip away like sand through his fingers. Send me your report, he said coldly into the phone, then hurled it across the room. That afternoon, he barely looked up as his longtime housekeeper, Mrs. Chun, brought in candidates for Emma's new live-in caregiver. This is Maria Vasquez, Mrs. Chun said quietly. She came highly recommended. Thomas glanced up from his laptop, ready to dismiss her immediately. Simple gray dress. Weather hands. No credentials visible. Just another. His thoughts stopped midstream. Maria Vasquez stood in the doorway with a dignity that caught him off guard. She didn't fidget, didn't look away, didn't seem impressed by the marble floors or the Rothko painting worth $8 million. Her dark eyes met his with something he rarely saw, complete self-possession. Mr. Sterling, she said simply, her accent soft but her voice steady. Mrs. Chun tells me your daughter needs someone who will see her, not just care for her. I can do that. Thomas felt something shift in the room. You understand she's very ill? This isn't just. I understand that she's a child who's afraid, Maria interrupted gently. And that's something I know how to help with. For the first time in weeks, Thomas Sterling, who trusted algorithms over intuition, data over gut feelings, made a decision based purely on instinct. You start tomorrow. As Maria left, Thomas returned his calls with specialists in Tokyo. He didn't see the way Maria paused in the doorway, looking back at Emma's closed door with an expression of recognition that would have changed everything. If only he'd been watching. What had Maria recognized? What secret knowledge did she carry that made her pause with such knowing concern? Maria arrived at dawn carrying a single worn suitcase. The Sterling mansion operated with mechanical precision. Staff appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Meals materialized at exact times. Emma's medications arrived on silver trays, measured to the milligram. But nowhere in all that efficiency was there warmth. Maria's room was beside Emma's, a space larger than her entire apartment back home, yet somehow colder. She unpacked her few belongings, a photo of her own children, a worn Bible, and a leather notebook filled with her grandmother's handwriting. She traced the faded ink with her finger, hearing Abuela's voice. Mija, sometimes the old ways see what the new ways miss. In Emma's room, Maria found a little girl drowning in technology. Monitors beeped. For Stan stood sentinel. Medical charts documented every measurement of her declining health. But no one had asked about the drawing on her nightstand, a family portrait with one figure conspicuously absent. Hi, Emma, Maria said softly. I'm Maria. I'm going to be staying with you for a while. Emma looked up with exhausted eyes. Are you a doctor? No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who likes to listen. Over the next days, Maria observed everything. Thomas's pattern was relentless. Conference calls with Swiss specialists at 6 a.m., consultations with Johns Hopkins by 9, experimental protocol reviews by noon. He was trying to save his daughter with the same intensity he'd used to build his empire, throwing money, demanding results, controlling variables. But he never just sat with her. Emma, sweet and heartbreakingly patient, had learned to be a medical case instead of a child. She apologized when she felt sick. She held still for procedures without complaint. She asked permission to feel tired. Maria began small, reading stories, asking about Emma's drawings, sitting quietly when the child needed to cry. "Why doesn't Daddy come see me more?" Emma asked one evening. "He's scared, Mija," Maria said gently. Sometimes when people love someone very much, and they're afraid of losing them, they forget that being together is more important than fixing everything. Through the walls, Thomas heard this. He stood frozen outside his daughter's door, hand raised to knock, then lowered it and walked away. He had 3 more specialists to call. Maria watched him go, and in her pocket, her grandmother's notebook seemed to grow heavier. She'd seen Emma's symptoms before, the specific pattern of inflammation, the food triggers, the way stress made everything worse. She knew what this was. But suggesting traditional remedies to a billionaire who trusted only Harvard-trained doctors? She'd be fired before she finished the sentence. And she needed this job desperately. Her own son, back home, was counting on the money she sent. That night, Emma had her worst episode yet. Her fever spiked to 104. Thomas paced outside the room as doctors worked, his face gray with fear. Maria held Emma's hand, whispering prayers in Spanish, and made a decision that would change all their lives. What decision had Maria made? Would she risk everything to speak the forbidden truth? At 2 a.m., Maria sat in Emma's darkened room, watching the child's labored breathing. The medical team had left. The latest experimental drug was flowing through Emma's 4. Thomas had finally collapsed in his office, exhausted. And Maria knew, with the certainty that came from watching her grandmother heal dozens of children with these exact symptoms, that they were treating Emma wrong. She pulled out her leather notebook, its pages filled with recipes and remedies passed down through 5 generations. Her grandmother had been a curandera in their village, dismissed by modern doctors as a superstitious old woman, until those same doctors' treatments failed, and desperate families came to Abuela's door in the dark of night. Maria had watched her grandmother heal children with this same mysterious inflammation. Not with expensive drugs, but with specific herbs, carefully prepared bone broths, stress reduction, and ancient wisdom about how the body heals itself. She documented everything in this notebook, had even studied nursing to understand the science behind the traditions. But poverty had forced her to drop out, and now she cleaned houses instead of working in hospitals. "I could help you, Pequeña," Maria whispered to sleeping Emma. "I know I could." But suggesting folk medicine to Thomas Sterling? She'd seen his face when the housekeeper mentioned her grandmother's remedies. Polite dismissal mixed with barely concealed contempt. Science. Data. Peer-reviewed studies. That's what men like him trusted. Not the weathered notebook of an uneducated immigrant woman. Maria thought of her own son, Miguel, 12 years old and fighting asthma back home. The money from this job paid for his treatments. If she was fired for overstepping, she started to close the notebook. Then Emma stirred, crying out in pain. Maria watched the machines beep their helpless warnings, watched the expensive medicine fail to bring comfort, and felt her grandmother's words echo. "Mija, knowledge without courage is just cowardice in disguise." The next morning, she found Thomas in the kitchen, unshaven, drinking his 4th cup of coffee. "Mr. Sterling," she began, her heart pounding. I've been observing Emma's symptoms, and The doctors are running new tests today," he interrupted, not looking up from his tablet. "Apparently there's a specialist in Berlin who's seen something similar. Mr. Sterling, please. I've seen this before. In my grandmother's village, Now, he looked up, and his expression made her words die in her throat. "Your grandmother's village?" His voice was ice. "Maria, I appreciate your concern, but Emma needs real medicine, not folk remedies." "Understand, sir. I just thought." "Don't. He stood, and she saw the fear beneath his anger. Don't suggest that some tea or herbs can help my daughter when the best doctors in the world are baffled. That's not help. That's dangerous hope. Maria nodded, stepping back. Of course. I apologize. As she turned to leave, Emma appeared in the doorway, having heard everything. Daddy, she said in her small voice, why won't you let Maria try? Thomas knelt beside his daughter. Because I'm trying to save you with real medicine, sweetheart. The kind that works. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Nothing works, Daddy. Nothing helps. That night, Emma refused her medications. She sobbed that she was tired of being poked and studied and treated like a science experiment. And Thomas Sterling, brilliant architect of digital empires, realized he was losing not just the medical battle, but his daughter's trust in him to save her. With Emma giving up hope and Thomas facing his greatest failure, would pride destroy his last chance to save his daughter? The Berlin specialist's video consultation lasted 3 hours and cost $50,000. His conclusion, I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling. Without understanding the root cause, we're just managing symptoms. I suggest palliative care to keep her comfortable. Thomas's hand shook as he ended the call. Palliative care. They were giving up. He walked to Emma's room and stood outside, listening to Maria read her story. His daughter's laughter, so rare now, drifted through the door like a ghost of better times. When had he last made her laugh? Inside, Emma said, Maria, why do plants make medicine? Well, Mija, plants have been healing long before humans made pills. They know secrets we've forgotten. Could they help me? Maria hesitated. I think they could. But your father doesn't believe you, Emma finished sadly. He doesn't believe anything except his computers and doctors. Thomas felt the words like a knife. That evening, another specialist's experimental treatment failed spectacularly. Emma's fever spiked to 105. The medical team worked frantically while Thomas watched helplessly, his empire of solutions crumbling around him. When they'd finally stabilized her, Thomas found Maria in the kitchen at 5 a.m., preparing to leave for her rare day off. She looked exhausted, defeated. Don't go, he said quietly. She turned, surprised. Thomas's voice cracked. I don't know what to do anymore. They're all giving up. They're talking about making her comfortable. He looked at this woman he'd dismissed, this immigrant maid with her simple dress and weathered hands. If Emma were your child, what would you do? Maria studied him for a long moment. Then she reached in her bag and pulled out the worn leather notebook. I would remember that humans have survived for thousands of years before pharmaceutical companies, she said softly. I would remember that my grandmother healed 12 children with Emma's exact symptoms using protocols she learned from her mother, who learned from hers. She opened the notebook, and Thomas saw pages of careful handwriting, recipes, observations, notes about inflammation, immune response, dietary triggers. This isn't superstition, Mr. Sterling. It's generations of careful observation. Anti-inflammatory herbs combined in specific ways. Bone broths that provide amino acids modern medicine is just discovering. Stress reduction that allows the body to heal itself. My grandmother didn't have a degree, but she had something your expensive doctors don't. She had time and patience and centuries of knowledge. Thomas looked at the faded ink, at recipes written in Spanish and English, at detailed notes about children's responses to treatments. You really think this could help her? I think, Maria said carefully, that when my grandmother's wisdom worked, doctors called it a miracle. When it failed, they called it superstition. But yes, I think the body knows how to heal itself if we give it the right tools and stop interfering. Thomas thought of his own approach, aggressive interventions, experimental drugs, forcing results. What if he'd been making everything worse? Show me, he said, making a decision that went against every instinct of his data-driven mind. Please, show me what you would do. Maria nodded slowly. We'll need ingredients, specific herbs, fresh foods, and Mr. Sterling. She met his eyes. We'll need you to stop trying so hard to fix her. Sometimes healing requires surrender, not control. For a billionaire who'd built his fortune on control, it was the hardest prescription imaginable. Could Thomas surrender his need for control? Would ancient wisdom succeed where modern medicine had catastrophically failed? Maria's list seemed absurdly simple to a man accustomed to complex pharmaceutical protocols. Turmeric root, ginger, fresh bone broth from grass-fed beef, chamomile and nettle tea, omega-3 rich fish, papaya, leafy greens, protocols for gentle movement and meditation. This is it, Thomas asked, bewildered. This is what you think will save my daughter? This is what helped save 12 other daughters and sons, Maria replied calmly. Your doctors treat symptoms with balms. My grandmother taught me to give the body what it needs to stop attacking itself. She explained the science she'd learned in her incomplete nursing studies. How chronic inflammation was the body's confused response to perceived threats. How certain compounds in plants could modulate immune response. How stress hormones could trigger cascading failures in autoimmune conditions. Emma's body is fighting a war it can't win, Maria said. We need to make peace, not escalate the battle. Thomas authorized the purchase of ingredients, then called his medical team for an emergency meeting. The lead physician was skeptical. Mr. Sterling, I understand your desperation, but unproven folk remedies failed less catastrophically than your experimental treatments. Thomas interrupted. You said yourself you're out of options. So we try this. Monitor her blood work every 6 hours. If anything gets worse, we stop. The doctor agreed reluctantly. That evening, Maria began. She prepared a golden-colored tea from turmeric and ginger, adding honey and a squeeze of lemon. She made bone broth simmered for 24 hours, rich and fragrant. It smells good, Emma said weakly, the first positive comment she'd made about anything in weeks. Drink slowly, Mija, Maria instructed. Let your body remember what real nourishment feels like. Thomas watched, initially with skepticism. But then he noticed something. Maria wasn't just feeding Emma. She was creating a ritual. Gentle music. Soft lighting. No medical equipment beeping. Just a grandmother's care translated through generations. Can I help? He asked. Maria turned, surprised. You want to learn? I wanted to be part of this. Of helping her. For the first time since Emma's illness began, Thomas Sterling slowed down. Maria taught him to prepare the teas, explaining each herb's purpose. They worked side by side in the kitchen, Billionaire and Maid, learning together. Why did you become a nurse? Thomas asked as they chopped ginger. I wanted to understand why my grandmother's remedies worked, Maria said. To bridge the old knowledge with new understanding. But I had to drop out when my husband died. The money. You have children? 2. My daughter is 16, helping raise her brother. Miguel is 12. He has asthma. Thomas saw her weathered hands with new eyes. And you're here, away from them. The money I send home pays for Miguel's treatments. She smiled sadly. I understand desperation, Mr. Sterling. I understand what it means to watch your child suffer and feel powerless. In that moment, Thomas realized he'd spent weeks surrounded by experts who understood medicine, but not this. The terrible love of a parent watching their child slip away. After 3 days, Emma's inflammatory markers began to drop. Not dramatically, but unmistakably. The lead physician was baffled. I can't explain this. Then don't, Thomas said. Just keep monitoring. By day 7, Emma sat up for the first time in 2 weeks. By day 10, she asked to walk to the garden. And Thomas Sterling, who'd always needed to understand everything, learned to accept a miracle he couldn't explain. As Emma improved, what devastating truth about Maria would Thomas discover? And would it change everything? Emma's recovery continued, subtle but undeniable. Thomas found himself spending more time in the kitchen with Maria than in his office. He learned the names of herbs, the patience required for proper broth, the meditative quality of chopping vegetables with intention. You're good at this, Maria said one morning, watching him strain chamomile tea. I'm good at following directions, Thomas corrected. You're the one with actual knowledge. Knowledge is just paying attention over time, she replied. My grandmother watched sick children for 60 years. She saw patterns doctors missed because they were looking at charts instead of children. Thomas thought about his own approach. Always the data, never the person. Tell me about your family, he said. Maria's face softened. Rosa, my daughter, she's brilliant. 16 and already taking college courses. She wants to be a doctor, the kind who listens. She paused. And Miguel, he's my gentle boy. Loves books and birds. The asthma makes it hard for him to run with other children, but he doesn't complain. You must miss them terribly. Every day. But this job. She gestured around the kitchen. It pays for Miguel's inhalers, Rose's education, our rent. When you have children, you do what you must. Thomas felt ashamed. He'd assumed her life was simple. Instead, it was sacrifice he'd never had to make. That afternoon, Emma walked to the garden without assistance for the first time in months. Thomas carried his laptop, intending to work, but Maria stopped him. No, she said gently. Just be with her. I have 3 conference calls. Mr. Sterling, when did you last just sit with your daughter? No agenda? No trying to fix anything? Thomas couldn't remember. He set down the laptop and joined Emma in the garden. They watched butterflies, talked about her drawings. She told him about her fears, not just of being sick, but of being alone in a house full of people. I'm sorry, Thomas whispered. I've been so focused on saving you that I forgot to just be your dad. Emma leaned against him. You're here now. Meanwhile, the medical team continued monitoring in disbelief. Emma's inflammation markers were dropping to near normal levels. Her energy was returning. The mysterious condition that had baffled world-renowned specialists was retreating before herbs and bone broth and a grandmother's wisdom. I need to understand the mechanism, the lead physician insisted. Maybe some things don't need understanding, Thomas replied. Maybe they just need respect. Late that night, unable to sleep, Thomas did something he'd never done before. He Googled Maria Vasquez. What he found made him sit back in his chair, stunned. News articles from 3 years ago. Immigrant volunteer saves children at underfunded clinic. Stories of Maria correctly identifying rare conditions, helping children when doctors were stumped, using her grandmother's protocols. And then the pushback, unlicensed woman practicing medicine. Hospital administrators worried about liability. Doctors offended that an uneducated maid questioned their expertise. She'd been banned for volunteering, dismissed as dangerous despite her success rate. Thomas felt sick. The medical establishment had silenced her the same way he'd almost silenced her. And then he found a photo that changed everything. Maria with her own son, Miguel, in a hospital bed. The caption, "Mother seeks help for son while helping others." Miguel wasn't just sick with asthma. He had the same condition as Emma. And Maria had been treating him remotely with these same protocols while working to save enough money for proper care. Maria had been saving Emma while her own child suffered with the same condition. What would Thomas do when he learned this devastating truth? Thomas confronted Maria the next morning, laptop open to the articles. Your son has the same condition as Emma, he said quietly. Maria froze, her hand on the teapot. Yes. And you've been here, helping my daughter while I treat him the same way from a distance, Maria finished. My daughter sends me videos. I guide her through the protocols. Miguel is improving slowly. Why didn't you tell me? Would it have mattered, Mr. Sterling? Maria met his eyes. Would you have hired me if you knew I was desperate enough to leave my sick child for this job? Or would you have seen me as too distracted, too compromised? Thomas had no answer because he knew the truth. He wouldn't have hired her. I need this job, Maria continued, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. Miguel's treatments, Rose's education, our rent, it all depends on the money I send home. So yes, I left my sick son to care for your sick daughter. Not because I love him less, but because this was the only way to save him. The weight of her sacrifice crushed Thomas. She'd known how to heal Emma from the beginning, but had stayed silent to protect her job, to protect her own child. I'm so sorry, he whispered. Don't be sorry, Maria said. Just understand. The world is full of women like me, making impossible choices because we have no good options. We have knowledge, but no credentials. Experience, but no titles. We save children in the dark and get dismissed in the light. Thomas spent the rest of the day reading everything he could find about Maria's past. The testimonials from grateful parents. The children she'd helped. the success rate that rivaled expensive specialists. All dismissed because she lacked a degree. That evening, he made calls. By midnight, he'd arranged for Maria's family to fly to the city. By morning, Miguel and Rosa were on a private plane. When Maria saw her children walk through the door, she collapsed in tears. Miguel will have access to my medical team, Thomas said. And Maria, I want to fund your completion of your nursing degree. Full scholarship. You deserve. No, Maria interrupted firmly. Thomas blinked, stunned. What? I don't want charity, Mr. Sterling, Maria said, gathering her composure. I want respect. I'll accept your help from Miguel. He needs it. But my education? I'll earn that. Maria, after everything you've done, especially after everything I've done, she said. My knowledge was always valuable, Mr. Sterling. Whether you recognized it or not, whether I had credentials or not. I won't let you turn my worth into your generosity. She took his hand gently. What Emma needed wasn't expensive interventions. It was someone who saw her fully, listened carefully, loved without condition. Those things have no price tag. You don't owe me for that. But you do owe me recognition that I was always enough, exactly as I was. Thomas Sterling, who'd spent his life believing money solved everything, learned the hardest lesson of all. Some debts can't be paid. They can only be acknowledged. As Maria's quiet dignity taught Thomas about true worth, how would he prove he'd learned the lesson? And could he help others see what he'd almost missed? Miguel's recovery under the medical team's care, combined with Maria's protocols, was rapid. Thomas watched as his expensive specialists finally listened to Maria, incorporating her grandmother's wisdom into their treatment plans. He saw their skepticism transform into respect as they documented the results. This is remarkable, the lead physician admitted. The anti-inflammatory compounds in these combinations, we should be studying this. Then study it, Thomas said. Partner with communities who've preserved this knowledge. Learn from them instead of dismissing them. He established a foundation overnight. Not to take traditional knowledge, but to partner with communities, documenting healing practices with respect and compensation for the knowledge holders. Maria was offered the position of director. She accepted on one condition. The communities own their knowledge. We're documenters, not discoverers. We're students, not saviors. For her nursing degree, Thomas created a scholarship, not just for Maria, but for 20 other women in similar situations. Women with knowledge, but no credentials. Experience, but no opportunities. Call it the Abuela Vasquez Scholarship, Maria suggested. For my grandmother, who was the real teacher. But Maria taught Thomas an even harder lesson when he tried to make her a partner in his foundation. Mr. Sterling, she said gently but firmly, you can't undo the past by overpaying for the present. You didn't see my worth for months. You almost let Emma die because of your prejudice. Don't transform that into a fairy tale where you're the hero who rescued me. Her words stung because they were true. The real change, Maria continued, is in how you see people going forward. Not just me, everyone. The janitor who might have engineering insights. The assistant who might see business patterns you miss. The immigrant who might carry knowledge that could change the world. You're right, Thomas admitted. I've spent my life thinking wealth meant wisdom. That credentials meant capability. That power meant I knew better. And now I know that the greatest poverty is arrogance, he said quietly. The most expensive education in the world couldn't teach me what you knew from watching your grandmother. Emma, listening from the doorway, spoke up. Maria says wisdom grows in gardens, not in vaults. Thomas smiled at his daughter. Healthy now, her color returned, her spirit restored. Your daughter is a better student than you, Mr. Sterling, Maria teased. That's because she had a better teacher. Over the following weeks, Thomas transformed his approach to business and life. He funded programs to identify and support non-traditional knowledge holders. He changed his hiring practices. He began listening more than directing. But more importantly, he transformed his relationship with Emma. No more scheduled emotions. No more treating time with his daughter as a task to check off. Just presence. Just love. Just being her father. 3 months later, at Emma's 9th birthday party, Thomas watched his daughter laugh freely, something he'd thought he'd never see again. The party was simple, a garden gathering, children planting herbs under Maria's guidance. No ice sculptures or celebrity performers. Just life. Just joy. Just enough. Cliffhanger. As Thomas reflected on how close he'd come to losing everything, what final wisdom would Maria share that would define his legacy? The Foundation's first project partnered with Maria's grandmother's village. Thomas traveled there himself, his first time in a rural community without a five-star hotel nearby. He met the curandras, the traditional healers, the grandmothers who carried centuries of knowledge. He listened, really listened. My abuela always said, one elderly woman told him, through a translator, that the sickness in rich countries is not in the body, it's in forgetting we're all connected. Thomas thought about his isolation. His mansion filled with staff he never truly saw. His success built on seeing people as resources rather than humans. Back home, Emma was thriving, not just physically but emotionally. She and Maria spent afternoons in the garden, planting the herbs that had saved her life. Why did Daddy not believe you at first? Emma asked one day. Maria considered carefully. Your father is a good man who made a common mistake. He thought that because he had money and education, he knew more than people without those things. But wisdom isn't about what school you attended or how much money you have. It's about paying attention, being humble, and staying open to learning from anyone. Even from kids. Especially from kids, Maria smiled. Thomas overheard this from the kitchen where he was, incredibly, learning to cook traditional recipes from Rosa, Maria's daughter. You're actually good at this, Mr. Sterling, Rosa said, watching him carefully dice vegetables. Call me Thomas, he said, and I'm following instructions. You're the one with skill. Rosa smiled. Mom says you're different now, that you see people. I should have seen people all along, Thomas replied, especially your mother. His company changed too. Thomas began implementing what he called the Maria Principle, actively seeking wisdom from unexpected sources. The cleaning staff's observations about office workflow, the security guard's insights about building safety, the cafeteria workers' knowledge of employee morale. Innovations emerged from everywhere once everyone was invited to contribute. At a board meeting, a senior executive questioned the approach. We're supposed to take business advice from janitors? We're supposed to take wisdom from wherever it grows, Thomas replied. 6 months ago, I was ready to dismiss a woman who ended up saving my daughter's life because she didn't have the right credentials. I won't make that mistake again. He publicly credited Maria in interviews, ensuring her story challenged others' prejudices. Magazine covers, the maid who saved the billionaire's daughter and taught him what wealth really means. Maria was uncomfortable with the attention, but accepted it as part of the larger mission, changing how society values knowledge. If my story helps one person see their maid, their janitor, their driver as a full human with wisdom to offer, she said, then it's worth it. The Sterling mansion transformed. Still beautiful, but warmer. Staff were invited to share meals with the family. Maria's children live there now while she completed nursing school online. The Marble Palace had become a home. At Emma's 9th birthday celebration, what final lesson would emerge that would define the true meaning of wealth? Emma's 9th birthday party was everything her previous parties were not. No professional photographers. No catered delicacies. No exclusive guest list. Instead, a garden full of children from all backgrounds, classmates, neighborhood kids, children from Maria's community. Together, they planted an herb garden under Maria's gentle instruction. This is chamomile, Maria explained, holding up a seedling. When you're worried or can't sleep, this little plant wants to help you. Isn't that amazing? That the earth provides medicine for free. Emma carefully planted her chamomile, her hands in the soil, her face glowing with health and happiness. Thomas watched from the patio, Miguel beside him. My mom says you're a good person who learned to be a better person, Miguel said, his breathing clear and strong now. Your mom is generous, Thomas replied. Almost let my pride cost me my daughter. But you didn't. You listened. Eventually, too late almost. Rosa joined them, carrying a tray of tea she'd made from the garden herbs. Mom wants you to try this, Mr. Sterling. She says it's a celebration blend. Thomas took the cup, savoring the aroma. Mint, lavender, rose hip. Simple ingredients transformed into something beautiful. Maria approached, wiping soil from her hands. Happy. Very, Thomas said. Thank you for this. For everything. You gave me a job, Maria replied. I gave you what any parent would give, a chance to hope. You gave me so much more than that. Did I? Or did I just reflect back what was already in you? The capacity to change, to listen, to see beyond your assumptions. Thomas considered this. You're saying I save myself? I'm saying we save each other, Maria smiled. You gave my son treatment I couldn't afford. I gave her daughter treatment you couldn't see. We both learned that wisdom doesn't come from what we have, but from what we're willing to receive. Emma ran up, dirt smudged and laughing. Daddy, come plant something. Thomas knelt beside his daughter in the garden, his expensive suit gathering soil stains, and planted basil under Maria's instruction. This little plant, Maria said, teaches us about abundance. The more you harvest from it, the more it grows. That's how knowledge works too. Share it, and it multiplies. As the children laughed and the garden grew, Thomas reflected on his journey. 6 months ago, he'd stood in his penthouse overlooking the city, powerful and desperate. He thought money could buy anything. Credentials meant everything. Status equaled wisdom. How wrong he'd been. The greatest treasure in his home had been the woman he'd almost dismissed. The deepest wisdom came from a leather notebook written in a grandmother's hand. The most valuable lesson was free humility. Maria, he said quietly, what do I tell people who ask what saved Emma? The herbs? The protocols? Your grandmother's wisdom. Maria knelt beside him, helping Emma water her seedlings. Tell them the truth, Mr. Sterling. Tell them that your daughter was healed when you finally stopped trying to buy her cure and started receiving it with open hands. Tell them that the greatest poverty is believing we have nothing to learn from those we think beneath us. And tell them that the greatest wealth is the humility to recognize truth wherever it comes from. She looked around the garden, at children from every background working together, at plants that would heal and nourish, at a family transformed by surrender rather than control. Tell them, Maria continued, her voice soft but certain, that we are all both teachers and students in this life. That wisdom grows in unexpected gardens. That healing happens when we honor the dignity in every human soul. And that love, real, humble, attentive love, is the only currency that truly matters. Emma looked up at her father. Did you learn that, Daddy? Thomas smiled, his heart full. I'm still learning, sweetheart. Every day, as the sun set over the garden they'd planted together, Billionaire and Maid, powerful and humble, student and teacher, Thomas Sterling finally understood what money could never buy. The wisdom to receive, the humility to learn, the grace to change, and the recognition that every human being, regardless of credentials or class, carries seeds of wisdom that could change the world. If only we'd humble ourselves enough to plant them. Moral lesson. True wisdom recognizes no class or credential. It flows wherever compassion, observation, and humility meet. The greatest knowledge is often held by those the world overlooks, and the greatest poverty is the arrogance that refuses to listen. We are all both teachers and students in this life. Wealth means nothing if it builds walls instead of bridges, and genuine healing of body, heart, and society begins when we honor the dignity and insight in every human soul. The richest person is not the one who has the most, but the one who is humble enough to receive from anyone. Money could never buy the wisdom to receive, the humility to learn, the grace to change, and the recognition that every human being, regardless of class or credentials, carries seeds of wisdom that could change the world, if only we humble ourselves enough to plant them. Moral lesson. True wisdom recognizes no class or credential. It flows wherever compassion, observation, and humility meet. The greatest poverty is the arrogance that refuses to listen, and the greatest wealth is the humility to learn from anyone. We are all both teachers and students in this life. Healing of body, heart, and society begins when we honor the dignity and insight in every human soul. The richest person is not the one who has the most, but the one who is humble enough to receive from everyone.